Good morning, people. I'd like to get this meeting. Good morning. So I'd like to kind of welcome you all this nice, beautiful, warm, sunny morning in the tropical paradise we're in here. But tomorrow we will probably have the rules finalized, and we'll go back over the, make sure the conferee rules are theirs also, and we'll talk a little bit about bill introductions and stuff then as well. So especially for the new people, we'll kind of go over that step and that process for you so you kind of have a little better feeling exactly how the process kind of works, in case you're not real for sure. But to get the meeting kind of started here, to start off, we're going to have ABC, Debbie Beavers, the Director of Alcoholic Beverage Control. Oh, excuse me, let me back up here. I need to do some bill introductions first. Let's get that out of the way. Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a year or two ago, we passed with 74 votes in the House to call a convention of states. We have a rule in Kansas that we need a 2/3 majority, which 74 is not. However, federally, it's just a simple majority. And so the Convention of States people are suing to try to get what we passed to be good enough, because it was a simple majority. So what this bill is about is if the state gets involved in an Article 5 Convention of States, how will the delegates to the convention be selected? So it's 25 RS 0220.
So just to be clear about this isn't about the question of calling a convention. This is if a convention has been called.
Right.
This will be the selection process, because we currently don't have a selection process in place.
Correct. So if the Convention of States people prevail in federal court, then we're going to need a way to select the delegates, and this is what this bill would do.
Any questions? Without objection, introduced. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm introducing RS 0019. This bill prohibits state funding for national heritage areas and national historic trails without approval from the legislature. And this was a bill that I introduced last year. We had a hearing on it last year, but it didn't make it out of committee.
Any questions? Without objection, considered introduced. Any other bill requests? Representative Howell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm introducing RS 0256. It's concerning concealed carry, and it is providing for a transition from provisional license to standard license.
Any questions about that? Representative McNorton.
Representative, can you repeat that last bit, please?
It's concerning providing for a provisional license to a standard license.
So just to kind of expand on that, correct me if I'm wrong, but just to maybe help explain a little bit more. So there was a kind of a gap in the kind of a hiccup in the process where if you are 18, 19, or 20 and got concealed carry permit, there was an issue about when you turn 21, converting that license over to a new license, where you couldn't actually do that for like an additional year, I think, or something along those terms. But anyway, there was an issue when you turn 21. I mean, that's the first thing you want to do is get your license, because you get it flipped and everything else. But this will alleviate that. Any other questions? Without objection, introduced. Any other bill introductions? Yes, sir. State your name.
My name is Garrett Henson, and I'm with the Office of the Kansas Attorney General, and I am requesting the 2025 RS 0313, an act concerning unauthorized aliens, and the E-Verify program be introduced.
Any questions? Seeing none, introduce. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, now that that part's out of the way, we'll start into the presentation. Start off this first section, we're going to do a kind of a division overview of the ABC with Director Beavers. Welcome, Director Beavers.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Debbie Beavers. I'm the Director of Alcoholic Beverage Control. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today on this chilly morning to give you an update over the ABC division. It is our mission to promote, serve, and protect the health, safety, and welfare of Kansans by regulating the liquor industry, enforcing liquor laws, and other laws administered by the Department of Revenue. We have set priorities for ourselves. Those priorities that we focus on in addition to the public health and safety are customer service, educating our licensees, helping them be compliant with the liquor laws. We do focus on relationship building. With the industry, we hand deliver the licenses in most cases when they're in state. The local enforcement agent will hand deliver the license. That way they get to know their agent right out of the chute. They get education at that time, and it helps them set them up for success. If it's not possible to hand deliver the license, we go ahead and mail it out. Actually, we email it out, and then the agent has 14 days to get there and give them that education. And we also focus on compliance, and we want to change the behavior of of repeat violators. We do that through education and enforcement. So if a license fails an underage enforcement check, they get a follow-up check within the next 90 days, and that's the goal, is to help reduce the rate of recidivism. We also focus on maintaining a level playing field in the industry. We do annual inspections. We investigate 100% of all complaints that we receive, and we do conduct and participate in stakeholder meetings, and we like to get input from the industry prior to any type of policy change. We also focus on efficiencies and modernization. We are currently in the process of upgrading our software system, and the public portal will be significantly enhanced to reduce the number of forms that have to be printed off, filled out, and uploaded. And that will make the process a lot easier for licensees and new applicants. Funds from the modernization fee fund that we have are being used to enhance that public portal. Next, I have a recap on the 2024 legislative changes. It authorized microbrewery is able to self-distribute up to 1,000 barrels of their beer and 3,000 gallons of their hard cider annually. There's an exception if a microbrewery owns at least 25% of a caterer or DE license. Those licenses are exempt from the cap. It requires them to obtain a basic permit for wholesaling. Since that law passed, we found out that the TTB does not issue that, so we're not enforcing that section. It also lowers the maximum number of barrels a microbrewery can manufacture per calendar year to 60,000, from 60,000 to 30,000. It requires self-distributing microbreweries to comply with distributor laws and allows distributors or microbreweries to buy back or exchange their beer within 30 days of the expiration at the original sale price. Self-distributing microbreweries must file a geographic territory with the ABC and submit the monthly sales report to the Liquor Audit Division. The current microbrewery report was revised to reflect these changes. A microbrewery can sell original unopened containers at special events off of their licensed premise on events that are monitored and regulated by the ABC. And then it also required the Secretary of Revenue and the ABC Director to complete an annual study on microbrewery compliance with liquor enforcement tax and gallonage tax filing and payment. Those were submitted to the governor and the legislature on the 15th of January as required. Shipments of alcoholic liquor to Kansas residents, and for calendar year 2024, shipments were down a little bit more. I think during COVID, the shipments of known alcohol was really at its peak. We are using the fulfillment house special order shippers, and we are doing match reports, and we're analyzing them for overshipment. And then also the FedEx reports, common carrier reports play into that. And anything that we can't match with a licensee comes into another match report. And so we're identifying unlawful shipments. I think it's important to note in 2024, a suspect was criminally convicted in Indiana for selling alcohol products online that resulted in 4 deaths and multiple other injuries to unsuspecting citizens. That's one of the reasons it's a very important issue, unlawful shipments. Some of these shipments that we've identified come from a storage container that's not climate controlled or licensed in any way by a state or the federal government. Kansas is an active member of the National Liquor Law Enforcement Association direct-to-consumer work group, and we're working in conjunction with the TTB and the TTB's lab, common carriers, and industry manufacturers to address these illegal shipments, and it really is a complex enterprise. I added a new section this year called Hot Topics. One of the things that we've heard a lot about in the last year or so are the THC-infused beverages. And you might be asking, why does ABC care about that? Well, there's a public health and safety concern because there's no entity in Kansas regulating this market. We see a growing number of licensees who are either selling or distributing these products. They're generally advertised being Delta 8 or 9 derived from hemp under the Farm Bill, but they potentially may be in conflict with the AG Opinion 21-04. Nationwide, some of these products have been tested, and they've been found to have as much as 60% THC content, which is greater than some states that have legal medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. A couple of states are addressing this. Our concern is that if this does become regulated and a licensee is selling a product that is determined to be explicitly illegal, that could impact their liquor license. There could be administrative actions against the license for selling illegal products. So that's why we care about that issue. Another issue that we've heard a lot about are distributor requirements. We've had a lot of complaints from the industry regarding one of our newer distributors that's not delivering products to licensees. All of those complaints have been investigated. The industry argues that distributors are required to deliver products to all licensees within their franchise territory. ABC doesn't disagree with the fact that they should be required to deliver. The name of the license implies they distribute, they would be delivering. However, the statute specifically states that it shall allow, and delivery is one of those things that's authorized an activity. It doesn't require it. That same statute also authorizes distributors to import alcohol in bulk and bottle and label it, but they're not required to do it. So, and just as a reminder, anything in liquor law has to be explicitly authorized or it's prohibited. So, in our opinion, it would take a legislative change to require a distributor to deliver to licensees. Moving on, our org chart here is, I've got a little org chart here for you. We have 41 full-time positions. This past year, we added a 99-hour temp position, and it's an enforcement investigator. And we did that because we had so many enforcement vacancies for enforcement agents, and the amount of time it takes to the actual interview process is the easiest part of hiring an enforcement agent. They have to have a polygraph, a psychological evaluation, a deep background investigation, and those things were taking a lot of time from our agents who were already shorthanded. So we've got this investigator, and he's picking up once the enforcement supervisors select an applicant. He's picking that up and coordinating all those tests and procedures and doing the background investigation to free him up. That investigator is also going to be doing a few job fairs to help us with hiring of agents and underage cooperating individuals. Our administration department, we have the 4 areas. Admin, we have an operations manager. She oversees the administrative and legal units. She also manages multiple federal underage enforcement grants and our budget. Licensing, we're staffed by a licensing manager and 10 licensing representatives. They manage all and process all liquor licenses, permits, register each and every label of alcoholic liquor before it comes into the state of Kansas, and they collect the gallonage tax. In 2024, 95% of all of our applications were submitted online. And the snapshot we did earlier this month, we had 7,262 active licenses and permits. The next page has a breakdown. Permits, they just continue to increase every year. Our other category is also increasing, which is distributors, farm wineries, microbreweries, microdistilleries, manufacturers, fulfillment houses, non-beverage users, and special order shippers. Retail liquor stores have been ticking upwards the last 4 years. We had, earlier this month, we had 739 licensed retail liquor stores. And then our on-premise have increased as well. Like I mentioned previously, all of our labels are registered before they come into Kansas. Earlier this month, we had 62,813 active labels. They're also renewed annually, and we have one person who does all of this, and she's amazing. Cereal malt beverage, you know, the change in the legislature back in 2017 that went into effect in 2019 requires ABC to regulate the sale of beer by cereal malt beverage licensees, which is about probably 95% of what they sell anymore. So we have a comparison here of off-premise retail, CMB retailers. We had 2,065 compared to 739 retail liquor stores. And CMB on-premise, we had 876, and on-premise liquor licensees were 2,878. So we do collect the gallonage tax. I've got the tax rates in there for you. The Division of Taxation does the liquor enforcement and liquor drink taxes. Just one thing to note, as you look at the revenue chart, the light wine gallonage tax was up just a little bit, and the fortified wine gallonage tax was down quite a little bit, and that's due to the impact of the law change a couple of years ago to change light wine up to 16% and below, so that's reflective of what we would expect to see. Our enforcement unit provides all of our investigative services necessary to regulate and enforce the liquor laws. Like I said, we do have 18 enforcement positions. 3 are currently vacant. We have 3 supervisors and a chief enforcement officer. They are all certified law enforcement officers. Their priorities are to educate and train. They investigate potential applicant qualifications, hidden ownerships, underage checks, and all, well, again, 100% of all of our complaints. And then they enforce the liquor laws. We do routine inspections to all licensees each year. We also do a lot of joint operations with other law enforcement entities and focusing on public safety and underage laws and overservice. And then we also enforce the tax on the illegal drugs on behalf of the Director of Taxation. So when enforcement agents have an alleged violation, they compile their case, they submit it. The ABC Assistant Attorney General then makes a decision on whether it's prosecuted. Any criminal cases that we have, they're also compiled and sent to the local DA for potential prosecution. So our enforcement activities, we had inspections. We had 3,453 of those this year. We had other investigations were 663, and then new license delivery educational visits, 428. And you can compare those numbers with previous years. Our underage compliance rates, we had 95% on the follow-up checks. So the recidivism was rate, the initial rate was 89%. Then we go back, and for those ones who failed their check, we go back and they were 95% compliant. So that's what we're hoping to see. Our CMB retailer activities, we do random and chosen control buys. We did, for on and off premise, we did 52. Chosen control buys, we did 67, and then the random control buys, we did 428 in fiscal year 24. Our compliance rates, random was 92%, chosen was 94%. Chosen does include the follow-up ones for recidivism. Our legal unit, we have, of course, we have our AAG, but we have a legal assistant, and we have a program consultant. They process the legal orders, collect the fines, do the background checks. Our legal assistants also are custodian for evidence. And we did 206 administrative citations for liquor and 229 for liquor tax in fiscal year 24. Our liquor fines collected, we did for administrative violations, 171,570, liquor tax, 99,439.29. CMB citations in fiscal year 24, we issued 46. We collected 18,550 in fines. And then the drug tax enforcement on the illegal drugs, we did 118 assessments in fiscal year 24. The Division of Taxations established a $1,000 minimum, so anything above $1,000 that gets referred to us, we do that assessment. And then finally, liquor license surveys. We are focused on providing first-rate customer service and maintaining a level playing field. To measure that, we do anonymous surveys. They're quarterly. We send them out to all new licensees and permit holders that gave us an email address. And then 25% of existing licensees and permit holders are randomly selected and sent a quarterly survey. Our overall survey results for fiscal year 24 was 93% had positive results. So that is all I have for the ABC overview. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Before I take some questions here, I just want to kind of point out, you're not just a member of that National Liquor Law Enforcement Association, are you?
Oh, well, there's two associations. I think I know where you're going. National Liquor Law Enforcement Association, yes, we are members of that, but the National Conference of State Liquor Administrators?
That's the one.
That's the one? Yeah. Yes.
And you are chair of that?
Well, I am first vice president, and in July 1st, I will become the president of the National Liquor Administrators Organization.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Got any questions for the director? Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. It's always a nice way to kick off a 9 a.m. meeting talking about alcohol. I do have a few questions, and these are just really kind of to help educate me. With the new law that you talked about, they have to submit a monthly sales receipt report to you. Is that new, or is that something existing that all licensees have to do?
I believe you're referring to the microbreweries?
Microbrewery, thank you.
Yes. They always had to submit a report, but in addition to that, when they self-distribute, they have to submit the ABC 73 to the Liquor Audit Division, just like any other licensee that's distributing.
Okay, thank you. And the second question, on the page 9 of your report, you give, under enforcement, you give 4 bullets that you investigate for, liquor license applicant qualifications. When it comes to the licensee violations that you talk later, which of those are the most prominent? Is the underage enforcement or potential hidden ownership? What is it that is the most prominent for violations of their license that the enforcement officer will see?
I would have to look that up to give you a specifically accurate answer to that, the percentages of those, and I'll be happy to provide that to the chairman.
Yeah, I would just be curious. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for a very, very good report. 1 or 2 questions. You mentioned about the THC-infused beverages problem. So do you have any notion as to how many liquor stores are actually selling these products, or how common is it?
I don't know what the percentage is, but it is pretty common. Our agents are reporting when they do inspections that they see them selling the products.
I can have a follow-up on that. So have you been in touch with the Attorney General's office as far as if he had issued an opinion, on these enhanced THC levels? Have you had some discussions with him or his office?
Our Assistant Attorney General is contacting them to ask about that.
Okay. And if I have one final question. All right, thank you. Further in your report, on the taxation, I think it's page 9, where you show that the enforcement tax raises like $81 million a year. And where does all that money go? I mean, you say there's only 18 people in that position as far as enforcement. I mean, $81 million seems like a lot of money. And where does it how is it spent?
It goes to the state general fund.
And okay, so it's basically just a tax. I mean, enforcement itself doesn't cost $81 million.
That's correct. It's a tax in lieu of sales tax.
I see. Thank you.
And just kind of want to touch base on that THC that he mentioned there. You said there could be some issues because you have a lot of licensees that do sell it if they find the product to be illegal. But it's in our statute, isn't it, that if a distributor or a liquor license holder does get convicted for selling a product like this, that they'll never own another Kansas license in their lifetime? Is that correct, or as you know it?
I believe that is correct.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I got one quick follow-up one here. When you were talking about the CMB enforcement's compliance checks that you were doing, since you really don't have any licensing to track all those, what's your process to know where those are at?
Thank you for asking that. The current process is that each CMB retailer license has to have a state stamp on it. And there was a long-standing agreement way before my time with ABC that we would give those to the city and county clerks to expedite the process. So the city, county, local jurisdiction, they issue the license, they collect this $25 state stamp fee, and then they send the application and a copy of all that and the $25 by the 25th of the following month. That's the process. It's a rather broken process. Clerks change. they don't know they're supposed, they only have to submit when they issue a CMB license. They may forget, they may not know they're supposed to. Best case scenario, we know where a CMB location is 5 weeks after it's been issued. Worst case scenario I can tell you, has been over a year that we don't know where they are. So makes it tough to enforce.
Are there any other questions regarding this? Okay. Seeing none, let's go ahead and jump on into the microbrewery compliance study.
Okay. ABC and the Division of Taxation worked on this study that was required by House Bill 2124 last year, and it required the Secretary of Revenue and the Director of ABC to conduct a study on microbrewery compliance with state laws, rules, and regulations governing the gallonage, or the collection and remittance of alcohol and liquor enforcement taxes and gallonage taxes. And so in the study, there's a copy of the exact language. We currently have 85 active microbrewery licenses in the state. It's important that you understand each license has specific authorized activities. And earlier in my briefing, I mentioned that everything in liquor has to be authorized or else it's prohibited. So it's important to remember that. There's certain things that they can do, and I did this graphic chart to try to help you all understand all of the things a microbrewery can do. They can make beer, they can store it, they can self-distribute, they can obtain a permit to import beer, they can sell and transfer it to their own club or DE, they can transfer it between microbrewery and packaging warehousing facility. So on this chart, you see there's a lot of things that a microbrewery can do and where the applicable taxes apply. On the next page, there's another graphic that we created that's a flow chart, a high-level flow chart of taxes. We have gallonage tax, and that's due where it's first manufactured in the state or where it first comes to rest in the state. Liquor enforcement tax then is collected by distributors on bulk sales of beer or wine to on-premise licensees, microbreweries, farm wineries, microdistilleries, special order shippers, on sales for off-premise consumption and retail liquor stores, and a microbrewery that's self-distributing to on-premise licensees and to their own club, drinking establishment, or caterer's license. Then the tax, if you're at on-premise, then there's another tax, a liquor drink tax, which is 10%. And then sales by cereal malt beverage licensees are subject to gallon or sales tax. So ABC administers the gallonage tax. It's due the 15th of the following month. They have to report, they have to file and pay their report. If they're self-distributing, like we mentioned earlier, they have to also do the Form ABC 73, the monthly report of on-premise sales, and that goes to the Liquor Audit Division. They all file their consolidated reports, the ABC 1025, it's the monthly gallonage tax return and report. And we have a graphic here that has receipts for fiscal years on gallonage taxes for microbreweries. Gallonage tax goes to the state general fund. And then the Division of Taxation administers the liquor enforcement tax and reporting requirements. That is 8%, and it's on the gross receipts of sale of alcohol or cereal malt beverages by retail liquor stores, microbreweries, farm wineries, and to clubs, drinking establishments, and caterers by distributors. They report and pay by the 25th of the following month. I have a little chart here that shows microbrewery enforcement sales tax receipts in fiscal year 24. There was just over 211,000 collected, and those collections go to the state general fund as well. And I think we should point out that other taxes applicable to alcohol, liquor drink tax, that's at on-premise, that's a 10% tax and for alcoholic drinks, and then sales tax by the CMB distributors. So on to the meat and potatoes of the report. I think the most important things that are in this graphic to share with you, this was for calendar year 24, except December returns were not due yet whenever I had to file this. So, and it was a totally manual process, is why we didn't go deeper. So 34.67% of microbrewery returns were filed late. And we had 7 complaints that we routed to enforcement for non-filed or non-paid gallonage taxes, 2 violations for failure to file and pay gallonage taxes. We had 28 microbreweries that reported self-distribution. We had 9 that failed to notify us of their geographical territory prior to self-distributing. And then we had 19 microbreweries that failed to make the minimum 100 barrels required by their license. And we did exclude 9 that didn't have a license for an entire year. We had 3 microbreweries with violations for failure to file and pay their taxes. And 19.07% of the microbrewery enforcement returns were filed late. So, recommendations from the Department of Revenue. 19 microbreweries that are not making enough beer as required to hold their license seems to be an issue, and we would request that the legislature address that issue. Also, microbreweries, since 2017, have been allowed to sell and transfer their beer to a DE that's also owned by the same entity. It may be the same premises. Prior to that, they had to go to a distributor and then back, and it makes sense. But with this, so they can sell and transfer, and I think that's important. The statute says sell and transfer their own product to their own DE or club. Liquor enforcement tax is imposed on such transaction, but we're finding that microbreweries are not generally reporting that they're selling it or collecting the enforcement tax on that. Current law doesn't really authorize it, doesn't specify a price. They are subject to trade practices, which means they have to sell it to the same price as they do another DE. But it's a bit of a gray area, especially when it comes to the taxation on that. So that's something that we believe could be clarified, and also the statutory authority to require electronic reporting and filing would make these kinds of studies so much easier to get the information that you're requesting. With that, I'll be happy to stand for questions.
I had one I just wanted to touch base on real quick here, just out of curiosity, because I actually don't know the answer to this one. But why does the ABC not have a role whatsoever when it comes to collecting the enforcement tax?
ABC does not, the Division of Taxation does.
No, but why does the ABC not have any role at all into that? I mean, it just makes sense that you would have some role in that. This is your wheelhouse, right?
Yes, but that falls under the taxation statutes and not under Chapter 41.
I understand.
Sure.
That's always baffled me just a little bit. Any other questions? Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director. kind of going through that flow chart, there's a lot in that flow chart. Kind of walk through just real high level the number of taxes that microbreweries currently pay. They pay a federal tax, and then on the state level, can you help me just real quick walk through? They pay.
On the state level, they pay gallonage tax. And then when a microbrewery sells their beer to the public, they collect liquor enforcement tax.
And a gallonage or a drink tax as well?
A drink tax?
Yeah.
They would have to have a drinking establishment, club, or caterer's license in order to do that. And I think it's important to point out that each license, again, has their own authorized activities and restrictions. So a microbrewery can also, as in the chart, can also be licensed as a club, drinking establishment, or a caterer's license. So it would be a DE owned by a microbrewery that would have the liquor enforcement tax, or liquor drink tax, excuse me.
Okay. I have one more, is that okay?
Go ahead, Representative.
So this enforcement tax that's called out in here, this 8% enforcement tax, that's not being done today or hasn't historically been done. Is it an interpretation change that's asking for the increased tax, or are you asking the body to add this additional tax? What's the shift? What's the difference?
I believe the law is clear. The law specifically says they can sell and transfer to their own DE. When that sale occurs, now that self-distribution has been authorized by the legislature, they're subject to trade practices. So they have to sell at the same price they would sell anybody else. What we're finding is they're not reporting that as a sale, and they're not collecting the enforcement tax. Therefore, it gives the DE that's also owned by a microbrewery, it gives them an unfair advantage.
Thank you.
How big of an issue is that? How many people do we have that just think they don't have to pay that or not paying it for whatever reason?
I think it's prevalent. From the reports the Division of Audit pulled, they're not reporting sale to their own DE. I can't give you a dollar amount if that's what you're asking for.
I was just kind of curious how big that is. Because that falls under revenue, right? This isn't something you go after the enforcement on? This would be revenue going after the enforcement on this?
Yes.
Okay. I'll say, because I've read it multiple different places. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it a little bit, because when I read that in your brief, I went to the handbook, the microbrewery handbook, and it states it pretty clear. A microbrewery that holds a club, drinking establishment, or caterer's license must remit liquor enforcement tax on all beer transferred from the microbrewery for sale by the club, drinking establishment, or caterer. That's pretty clear. And also going through the statutes, going through 794101 and also 4102, I think it's fairly clear, but that's just, maybe we'll have some questions for revenue about that.
Yes, I'm happy to defer those questions to revenue.
Any other questions? Oh, Representative James. Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for the overview. I forget the page number on this, but one of the things you asked us to address was the issue on not holding the license for about 22%, 19 of the microbrewers do not produce 100 barrels. What is the issue? Is the issue the number of 100 barrels, or is there something else related to it that I'm not familiar with?
Sure. Current law requires a microbrewery to produce at least 100 barrels annually of beer, and we have 19 that aren't meeting that requirement.
So then the issue is the 100 barrels is the specific requirement? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Are those licensees, are they being counseled or are they being revoked, or what's the process if they're not following the law on that?
Well, we haven't done anything to date on this since we just finished this study. We are going to do some education on that, but it rather falls along the line where a county has a 30% food requirement for on-premise. If they're not meeting that, that's not a state requirement. That's a local requirement for that county, so we don't renew a license when they're not meeting that. So this is a state requirement, so it's an issue I believe needs to be looked at.
So the 19 that you were talking about in here, are those people that, all those 19 just fell into that category this year? Otherwise, their license wouldn't have been renewed. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we've never not renewed a license for this because we didn't pull these statistics previously, but we will be looking at that moving forward. And I do know that some that we've talked to have said that's not in their business plan. They're never going to make that much. So I think that's why we asked the legislature to look at that.
Representative Osmond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your testimony. On your report, you indicate that there's gallonage returns that need to be submitted by the 15th of the month for the previous month's activities. On page 8, you indicate that fully a third of those returns are not submitted in a timely fashion. As a general question, do you get those returns eventually, or when do you get them?
Yes, our licensing staff does monitor them, and they check to see if they've filed. If they haven't, they reach out and contact them to get them to file. And sometimes it takes multiple attempts to get them to file, but we eventually get it.
And does that mean a lack of funds or a lack of information or both or something else entirely?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question.
No, is it information that they're filing, or is it taxes that they're filing or funds that they are filing by the 15th of the month?
They're filing how many gallons that they manufactured. They get a tax credit for transferring them out of state. If they sold their beer out of state, they don't have to pay the gallonage tax on that. So they file the tax return portion, and then they just tell us the number of gallons they sold out the door, self-distributing. It's not a hugely intensive report. We get more of a high-level report from the microbreweries.
All right. Okay, thank you very much.
I was actually going to kind of ask a question along that lines as far as if you could kind of just, what determines late when you put them into that column there?
What determines late? If it's not postmarked by the 15th for gallonage tax, if they're mailing it in. For liquor enforcement tax, I believe the department goes by the 25th, postmarked or filing online. Is that right? Okay.
So even if they're 1 day late, that would put them in this column?
Pardon me?
If they were just 1 day late, that would put them into this column?
Yes, it would, but what we've seen in this study is that we're not looking at just 1 day.
I got you. Do you know if the process and the fine structure for you and with the gallonage and with the Department of Revenue with their enforcement tax, are the penalties and fines on the same structure, or are they completely different?
There's no statutory authority for penalty and interest on gallonage tax. There is on liquor enforcement and liquor drink tax, but you would have to ask to taxation about that.
Representative Wilcott?
Quick follow-up here on the 100 barrel minimum. You have a recommendation or an ask that the legislator address that. Is there a kind of the logic or reason why that's there? What would be the necessity of having that minimum?
I would only have a guess at that. And my guess would be that they want them to be a business. So you have to, if you're going to be a microbrewery, you need to be a business and you've got to produce a minimum number. How that number came to be, I don't know, and I don't know, that's my best guess.
Okay.
Do you know when that was enacted? I was just kind of curious when that one came about, because it does sound like it would probably be the difference between being a kind of a home brewer / hobbyist brewer versus a business. But I'll be honest with you, I can't find minimums almost anywhere else I look. I look in other states and I looked up and down for a lot of things. I really don't see minimums attached. Everything's attached to a maximum, right? So even states that have different classifications, I mean, they have their stipulations are can't produce more than. But do you have any history on that at all?
The only thing I can offer on that really is that there is a beer manufacturer's license, and you can manufacture less than that, but you don't get the microbrewery perks. So we've had people that have had to go that route because they said, I'm not going to make that, but it's not what they desire. I do know that some states have like nano breweries that are very small, very limited scope. Some states have brew pubs.
Any other questions for the director? Director, actually, if we could kind of just have you step aside for a second, we might have come right back to you. But we'll bring up Mr. Hale real quick, and maybe he can answer some questions for us if he's okay with that.
So you said if I'm okay with that? So I got a choice?
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and state your name for the record.
Michael Hale with the Department of Revenue, and I'm on the tax side of things, not the regulatory side like Ms. Director Beavers is. So it's pointed out in page 9 of the report that there appears to be a disconnect or a gap, if you will, in the reporting of enforcement tax on microbreweries who are basically transporting it for themselves. So we're just asking for clarification. Is that the intent of the legislature? We're not sure that it is, because it would appear to create a disparate treatment in that regard. And we kind of point that out, that there'd be an unlevel playing field. The difference is the language in Chapter 79, which is the tax side, reads differently than the language in Chapter 41, which is the regulatory side. It would appear that the regulatory side talks about sale and transfer, but the word transfer does not appear in the tax statute. It's simply sale. So we would suggest, and we've got some proposed language that would sync up those two provisions so they would read identically and make it clear not just on Chapter 41 regulation, but also Chapter 79 taxation, that when you self-distribute, you owe the 8% enforcement tax.
Can you tell us what size the problem of this is? Is this like 10% of the microbreweries, 20%, 50%, 80%? I mean, what are we talking about? How big of a?
We're looking at like most of them. I mean, I think we just found a small handful that are actually remitting the enforcement tax. How many microbreweries do we have? Pardon me? It's like 82 microbreweries, and we only found a handful that are actually remitting the enforcement tax. Probably 75, 80% are not. We're not sure that was intended by the legislature, and so we're just asking, do you want to clarify this to make sure that that gap is covered, or we bridge between the two statutory schemes?
Okay, if we were to go down that road and clarify that, that would not be necessarily retroactive, right?
Oh, no.
Okay.
It'd be
Do you know how long this has been going on? By rough guess?
Probably since 17 or 18.
So when the law changed there in that 16 for 17-ish?
But no, it'll be prospective only. We're not going to go back in time.
Completely understand. I just wanted to kind of sure of that. Any other questions? Representative Corbett?
Thank you, Chairman. One of the questions I have for you, for filing fees or your sales tax returns, they always have a due date on your forms. Do you go by the postmark? Because you know how bad the postage is right now. You may be 2 weeks, but how do you read it for being late if it's postmarked prior to the date?
We generally look at the postmark, and of course, if the due date falls on a federal holiday like yesterday, then it would be the next business day. But yeah, it's usually the postmark.
What you're saying, normally the customer would not be charged a late or tax fee if it's postmarked prior to due date?
That's correct.
Representative Wilcox?
A quick follow-up to the chair's question a minute ago on going back, making it retroactive. If there was clarification made, would those 4 or 5 breweries be refunded there? Because they've paid, a small group has paid for a couple years. And if the decision is we're not going to go back on the other violators, would the breweries that have been paying, would they be refunded all those funds? Just to make it an equal playing field.
Well, that would be up to you all if you all wanted, but the normal rule would be no, there would not be a refund. But if you wanted to craft language to that effect, we could. Or if you want to make the language retroactive, we could. I wouldn't recommend that from my personal standpoint, but you certainly have that authority if you so choose. We think it's more of an education thing with the microbreweries. And so that's why we would suggest prospective only. But if you wanted to do refunds, that's certainly something that could be built in.
I appreciate the explanation of some of that. I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of this, but when I go to the case annotations here, I mean, it states here in case law, I guess, that the intent of the act is to tax all alcoholic liquor unless specifically exempted. Well, this is obviously, it's not specifically exempted.
This is speculation on my part, okay? I'm not representing the Department of Revenue at this moment in time. My speculation is that the microbreweries looked at this and said, taxes imposed on the sale. I'm simply moving my beer from here to my restaurant. I'm not selling it to myself. There's no, in the traditional sense of a sale, I'm not sending myself an invoice. I'm not writing myself a check. I'm simply moving it. Therefore, it's not even part of the tax base. It's not an exemption, but it doesn't even make it into the tax base. That's my speculation. We've not asked these microbreweries, why aren't you doing this? But that's my speculation. And so the proposed language that we would offer you all, if you are interested, is to bridge that gap and clarify that sale and transfer applies to the tax side just like it does the regulatory side. That would make it abundantly clear.
Thank you for that. I didn't mean to kind of harp on this or kind of zone in on this, but
No,
it is kind of fascinating here. But Representative Van Gordon?
So do most of these microbreweries that have a restaurant, do they have separate entities set up, or are they generally just one big business?
A lot of them are just one large business.
Representative Wagner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since you're from the Department of Taxation, I wonder if you'd have the answer to the question. This seems very parallel to if like Dillon's has a deli, you know, as far as providing food to their deli, you know, typically, I mean, from just a business standpoint, you know, wholesale transactions aren't typically, you know, taxed. I mean, but maybe in alcohol they are. But if this was Dillon's doing food, they don't tax the food, and then there's a retail tax when you purchase the deli meal at a Dillon's, for instance. Is there, or, you know?
No, you're correct. It would be considered as part of the total selling price. So, for example, if I'm a grocery store that has a deli, and I take potatoes from the produce department and chop them up and make potato salad and sell it, those are ingredient and component parts of the final product, which is potato salad. We would not require a tax on the purchase of the potatoes, which is just an internal function, but they would collect sales tax on the total finished product of the potato salad. Presumably, the cost of those potatoes would be built into whatever they're selling at. The difference was with alcohol, since it's a heavily regulated commodity, we do have gallonage tax, enforcement tax, and then drink tax. And as Director Beaver said, from their standpoint, the regular standpoint, it follows the license. We don't have that on the tax side, and so this would sync that up, this proposal that we have. It would act as a bridge.
Do you know if the KDOR penalties are the same as the ABC, or?
The delinquency penalties start at 10%. So if you're a day or two late, it's a 10% penalty, and then interest begins to accrue. After a certain point in time, it goes to 25%. I think it's 60 days. If your taxes go unpaid for 60 days, then it's 25%.
Representative Wilcox?
Thank you, Chair. So we're talking microbreweries, but alcohol industry in general. Do the state wineries have the same issue, or is that clarified with winery? Will they, if we make a change or a clarification, do we have to make a clarification for the whole industry, or is it specific to the microbreweries?
I have not looked at the wineries, but if I was a betting man, and I'm not, I would guess we'd find the same thing there as, I'm not sure if micro distillers can do this yet, but if micro distillers get to do this, might want to clarify it up front with them as well. So yeah, like I said, if I was a betting man, I'd say we've got the same issue on the micro wineries, farm wineries.
Thank you.
So I'm not real sure if you're comfortable asking this, or maybe if I have the director ask this question to her, but I want to go back to the charts that were in the presentation. Can you explain a little bit, like when I look at 21 versus 22, when I look at the gallonage tax, which is the amount of liquid produced, right? I know you don't do gallonage tax, but that's why I want to do the whole thing here. When I look at 21 versus 22, our gallonage tax is increased by almost 20% increase in gallonage tax. So 20% more beer was produced. But yet when I come over here to the enforcement side, liquor enforcement tax, it's about a 33% decline over 21 versus 22. I was just trying to explain that, kind of understand that a little bit.
I'll do my best to try to explain that. I think generally In these charts where you see the gallonage tax for beer, that's not specifically microbreweries, but back here we have it. Hold on. Generally, across the nation, one thing you're seeing with microbreweries is a decrease in the number of microbreweries. A lot of states are reporting that. So that may be, we've had a high in fiscal year 22 of gallonage tax reported by microbreweries. Then it dipped down, it's back up a tick. It just would depend on how many microbreweries you have making beer, you know. So that, what was the other part of your question? The enforcement?
Well, it was just kind of comparing 21, 22 from the gallonage versus enforcement. Like in 21, going to 22, looks like that was the largest year in recent history as far as how much beer was produced according to the gallonage tax, because that's when that tax is applied. But when I go back over to liquor enforcement tax, going from 21 to 22, it was probably, so it was a pretty historical jump down. So we go from a 20% increase in gallonage tax to a 33% decrease in enforcement tax year over year.
That sync up with the fact they're not reporting liquor enforcement? The microbreweries?
Yes, I mean, it probably syncs up with the fact that they're not reporting, the microbreweries aren't reporting that sale. And I also think it's important, I've mentioned several times, each license has its own right. A microbrewery cannot give their beer away. They can't give it away to another licensee, and another licensee can't receive free alcohol and resell it. So that is one of the issues on the regulatory side. The statute clearly says a microbrewery can sell and transfer. That sell, now that they're subject to trade practices, has to be at the same price they would sell it to another brewery or a drinking establishment. So that, you know, so they can't just transfer it, because that drinking establishment license that they also have has to acquire it legally. It can't be given alcohol to resell, so that's where it gets kind of jumbled a little bit.
So they can't transfer it, but it says they can transfer it?
It says sell and transfer. So that's the issue, is they're not reporting it as a sale, and they're not collecting the enforcement tax on that.
But that was a good point there. They actually made that they're not allowed to accept free product. So even if it's from themselves, they can't accept a free product. So there would be a violation there if they were to transfer their beer from the microbrewery to the drinking establishment, even if they owned it the same. That would be a clear violation, correct?
Correct.
But there's nothing in this. There's nothing in there. When you said clear trade practices, I believe is what you said. How would you go about monitoring, you know, what they sell the beer for? Because I don't remember actually seeing anything in that talking about a price when the beer to sell it to themselves, or you know what the requirements are there.
The change last year with self-distribution also made them subject to the distributor trade practices. So that's where it comes into play. They have to sell at the same price. They're acting like a distributor.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Well, guys, I think we're going to wrap that up right now. Director, thank you for coming out. Mr. Howell, thank you for coming out. We'll have some follow-up questions on here. We'll talk again here soon, both of you guys, and I really appreciate you guys coming and explaining some of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other business in front of us? We are having a meeting tomorrow. We have some more informational stuff, and then tomorrow we're going to go over some more stuff. We'll go over the rules of committee. We'll go over some of the conferee rules, and we'll kind of put that to rest so you understand some of those. We'll go over a little bit about the bill introductions, and The rules we'll have, we'll try to get them up on the website today, so you guys can take a look at those before our meeting tomorrow. Any questions? I'll see you guys tomorrow. Meeting's adjourned.